Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to break down James Rodriguez's role as an inverted playmaker and break down how he has played a key factor in Everton's perfect start to the Premier League season ahead of the Merseyside derby. So when we break down James Rodriguez's influence on Everton's great start to their season, what we end up seeing is that Everton start in a 4-3-3 with Calvert-Lewin up front. They have a wide forward in Richarlison looking to push central, and then they have James Rodriguez operating as an inverted playmaker, looking to cut onto his left foot, but his initial position is often dropping off the opposing fullback and looking to receive the ball in deeper positions ahead of the opposing wide player. The reason why he does look to do that is because he has a 1v1 advantage against the opposing side's wide player. And when you look at how Everton look to position themselves over on that left-hand side, you witness Richarlison looking to cut across the opposing side's fullback, and then Lucas Digne looks to push forward beyond that wide player to break into attacking positions. The other reason why it's so successful is due to James Rodriguez's overall passing range, and he's able to consistently ping balls over the top into the path of Digne or into the path of Richarlison looking to break into attacking positions. Ultimately, Ancelotti's system does witness the fullbacks pushing forward due to the fact that James does drop deeper or shift central, and you end up witnessing Richarlison looking to break into attacking zones in the box or drift central as well. When you look at the midfield structure, there were times where you had the shuttlers in Andre Gomes and Doucouré looking to hold their position aligned with Allan, and that's to ensure that there is protection out in the half spaces for Digne and Coleman, who do look to push forward. If the two Everton shuttlers aren't aligned with Allan, what we end up seeing is that Allan does hold his position in that midfield zone, and you have Doucouré or Gomes looking to push forward in between the lines, and the other player looking to hold his position in the half space. That means that Allan can shift over for the midfielder that is in between the lines, and then the holding shuttler can cover ground for his fullback pushing forward. If the ball is pushed towards the left-hand side, there are times where you see James looking to drift central in between the lines, and then he looks to dart across the pitch to sometimes shift over to the left-hand side to combine with his teammates, or he follows the attack and makes late runs towards the box. When we analyze James Rodriguez's opening 4 games at Everton, we're able to highlight his main strengths in the final third and how teams can contain him. When we look to his opening game against Spurs, we ended up seeing James Rodriguez dropping into space ahead of Alderweireld and Davies, and just in behind Son and Højbjerg or Winks, depending on which midfielder was on that side. When we look to a few examples of how they were looking to contain him, there was a time where we saw Allan at half splitting Winks and Son for James dropping ahead of Davies and Dyer, as did Calvert-Lewin, and Calvert-Lewin makes an instant forward run which pushes Dyer back into his initial position, and James cuts across Winks to clip a ball out between Lucas and Højbjerg for Richarlison peeling off Doherty's shoulder, which ultimately places Richarlison in a dangerous position. There was a time where James dropped deep to pick up the ball from Allan ahead of the Spurs midfield bank, and once again you witness Richarlison running across Doherty and Calvert-Lewin running across Alderweireld's shoulder, and that's when you see Digne pushing freely into Spurs' final third on the left-hand side beyond Lucas Moura. Minutes later, you have Coleman pushing forward in transition beyond Son, and he slides the ball across Winks for James between the lines, and James cuts across Lucas to slide the ball out to Richarlison, with Digne pushing forward to create a 2v1 situation, and that leads to a goal-scoring chance. And ultimately, that was the relative theme of that game against Spurs. When James would receive the ball in deeper positions, he was able to cut across his opponent and then locate either Richarlison running off the shoulder of Doherty or running across him, and then Digne being able to break forward beyond Lucas or Sissoko to get into good goal-scoring positions. And what you also saw from James in that opening game was that he was able to hold off pressure from the Spurs midfield and help Everton retain possession. There's a time where Coleman slid the ball across Son for James, who was closely marked by Davies, but James was able to hold them off and switch the ball out to an unmarked Digne, as Lucas was narrow to pull him out. There was a time where Doucouré slid the ball out to James, who dropped into his own half and was faced with Davies' tight pressure, and although he was fouled to the ground, James was able to maintain his control on the ball, hold off the challenge, and push forward to hold off Davies' challenge again before sliding the ball out to Digne. However, it was the game against West Brom where we initially witnessed the issues that James Rodriguez can encounter if sides mark him tightly. Against a West Brom side in a 5-4-1, James struggled to receive possession behind Diangana and Sawyers and just ahead of Gibbs and O'Shea. When we look to a few examples, initially we end up seeing Keane step forward with no press on him, and he splits the West Brom midfield for James, dropping central into a gap between the lines, but Bartley steps initially towards him and forces James to slide the ball first time to Dean. This ultimately led to James dropping deep towards the halfway line or sometimes even into his own half to pick up the ball, and he ultimately was forced to slide the ball out to Dean or Coleman pushing forward. There was a time where Alan slid the ball across Sawyers for James dropping towards his own half with O'Shea pressure tight on him, and we ended up seeing O'Shea poke the ball away from James, but James did a very good job of tracking back and poking the ball away from Diangana to ensure that Everton retained possession. And if we look to one final example, it's Dean wrapping the ball across Livermore for James, shifting central ahead of Bartley. And although James did have enough time to control the ball, he was forced to poke it back towards Gomes before Bartley stepped in. But it was in the second half where James was able to dominate the game as West Brom fell to 10 men and dropped off into a 4-4-1-1. What we often saw once again was James dropping deeper, this time ahead of Diangana to cut across him. And that's when you would see Richarlison making runs across Furlong so that Dean can make runs beyond Pereira. Initially, we have James cutting central and then across Sawyers to play a ball across Livermore and split Pereira and Furlong for Digne breaking free into left half space. And although Dean made a good run beyond Pereira, James' pass hit off his heel. Shortly after that, it was James who slid the ball to Richarlison in left half space ahead of Furlong. And once again, it's Dean running beyond Pereira for the overlapping pass, but Furlong did a very good job of blocking it out. And seconds later, James was heavily involved in Calvert-Lewin, putting Everton up 4-2. We witnessed James ahead of the West Brom midfield, locating Richarlison darting between Pereira and Furlong, and Dean running off Furlong into the box. James ended up clipping the ball over the top for Richarlison's run in left half space, and Richarlison was able to side foot James' pass across the center backs for Calvert-Lewin for the tap-in. James' next challenge was against a Crystal Palace side playing in a 4-4-2, and as he tried to receive the ball towards the touchline, you had Mitchell, Eze, and sometimes MacArthur stepping into his path to ensure that he couldn't receive it freely. Initially, you have Coleman slide the ball across Eze for James dropping level with Palace's midfield bank to get on the ball, and Eze's pressure forced a switch out towards Keane. There's a time where Doucouré dropped towards the right of Mina to poke the ball to James in his own half, and that's where we saw MacArthur step forward to swarm James with pressure, and he forced him to play the ball back to Mina. And there were several other examples where you end up seeing James dropping deeper to get pressed by either McCarthy, where he forced the ball back to Doucouré, where Eze stepped towards his path at the halfway line, and he forced the ball back to Doucouré, and then there's a time where he was immediately closed by Mitchell, and he forced James to play the ball back to Coleman. So once again, Palace's tight pressure forced James to play passes backwards and out to his fullbacks, but he was still able to find space in that opening half to ultimately shift the game. When we look to one example, we have Keane bursting forward into Palace's third beyond AU, and he ends up clipping the ball into James free and right half space as Mitchell is narrow, and James plays a first-time ball across Mitchell into the path of Doucouré, who controlled it upwards and was able to fire an effort on goal. And minutes later, James' movement and his passing was involved in Calvert-Lewin's opener. As Coleman pulls the ball back to Doucouré, it drags out Eze, and Doucouré squares the ball to James, who plays a first-time ball across MacArthur, who steps out late, into Coleman running off Mitchell's shoulder in right half space, and Coleman's pullback between Sacco and Mitchell is played across Kouyaté for Calvert-Lewin to put Everton ahead. And later on in that half, James' passing did result in Everton winning a penalty. James picks up Coleman's pass in an inside deep right position, and he dribbles around Eze to clip a diagonal ball out to Dean, breaking off Townsend into left half space, and he ended up nodding the ball off Ward's hand. In Everton's final game before the international break against Brighton, once again they came up against a 5-man backline, and initially James did encounter some issues once again, as Solly March could step into his path if he looked to receive the ball on the touchline, and then Mope could drop deeper to ensure that it was a 1v2 situation. And if Mope or March couldn't step into the path of James, then you could see Webster pushing forward from center back to apply pressure. Doucouré dropped the ball off to James, who looked to dribble back to half across Mope's pressure, but Mope was persistent and forced James backwards, which ultimately led to a loose touch that Connolly stepped into to help Brighton break forward once again. We saw March swarming James in Everton's half with Connolly shifting across, but James did well to split both, aiming to play the ball into Mina, and that saw Alzate step forward to help Brighton win possession. And while that pressure did force James to switch possession out to Sigurdsson, Doucouré, and Dean, what we ended up seeing from James was he was still able to influence the game despite Brighton's initial pressure. The first example that we look at is a team breakdown from Brighton, as Coleman slides the ball around Mope for Doucouré, marked tightly by Alzate. This is when James checks away from March to create separation. And as Doucouré slides the ball to James, who isn't marked tightly by March due to that movement, we end up seeing James play a first-time pass to Coleman running off Mope as Doucouré's movement takes out Alzate. And that's when we see Coleman break towards the box to force a save out of the keeper. And in that second half, Everton were able to kill off the game due to James's late runs into the box. It stems with Trossard playing a loose crossfield pass intended for March, but it hits off James. And that's when you see Calvert-Lewin sliding the ball across White into the path of Iwobi. Iwobi's able to pull the ball back across White and dunk. And that's when you end up seeing first Calvert-Lewin running across that 6-yard box to take out Webster, and James continuing his late run into the box freely to side foot a first-time effort into the open net. And James doubled his tally shortly after that, and once again it stemmed through an Everton transitional attack. It was Iwobi taking on White, and with Dean making an overlapping run to take away Veltman, Iwobi is able to slide the ball across White to split Basuma and Veltman for Doucouré running off Basuma. That's when you end up seeing James continuing his run towards the box from that transitional break. With Doucouré receiving that ball in left half space, it pulls out dunk, and it forces Webster to track the movement of Calvert-Lewin, which ultimately leaves James free in that right half space, and all Doucouré has to do is pick him out for James to tap another ball into the free net. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.